Amaka was a tall, dark-skinned woman who owned one of the busiest restaurants in Ikeja. Her place was not fancy, yet people trooped in from morning till night. Bankers, students, drivers, even wealthy business people all lined up for her meals. She sold rice, beans, amala, soups, and stews that people swore tasted different from anything else around. Customers would argue over who got the last plate of her egusi soup, saying it had a sweetness they could not find anywhere else. Everyone wondered how her food tasted so rich, even though she didn't use imported spices or expensive ingredients. To many, Amaka was simply gifted in cooking. But deep inside, she knew there was a secret no one could ever imagine. Her restaurant was called Mama Amaka's Kitchen. The signboard outside was faded, yet the crowd never reduced. If you passed the street at lunchtime, the noise of spoons hitting plates, people shouting for extra meat, and the smell of hot stew filled the air. Even rival restaurant owners in Ikeja could not understand how she had so much patronage. Some of them used to visit her secretly, hoping to steal her recipe. They would buy food, take it home, and taste it slowly, trying to figure out what she was adding. But no matter how hard they tried, they could never duplicate it. That mystery kept her competitors restless, but it also made Amaka proud. She knew what they didn't know. What Amaka hid was something no one could have ever guessed. It was not seasoning cubes, not crayfish, not palm oil, not pepper. It was not even about the way she fried her stew. Her real ingredient was strange, dirty, and shocking. She would stand in her small kitchen before opening hours, lock the door, and do her ritual. She would lift her arm, scrape the hair from her armpits, and add it secretly into the big pot of soup. She believed it gave her food a special power that made people crave it endlessly. To her, this was the charm that brought her success. And as her money grew, her secret grew darker too. Every morning before the sun rose, Amaka's restaurant already had people waiting. Drivers on their way to the park, bankers rushing before traffic, and students who didn't want to be late all stopped to grab food. Sometimes the line stretched across the dusty street, causing noise and arguments. People always said her food gave them energy, as if there was something spiritual in it. Some claimed that whenever they ate elsewhere, they felt empty, but one plate from Amaka's kitchen filled them for hours. It was as though her food carried a force stronger than ordinary pepper and salt. Even her drinks sold faster than she could serve them. The competitors in Ikeja hated this sight. Some of them went as far as visiting spiritualists to know what secret she used. They were convinced that no ordinary cooking could pull that kind of crowd. But none of their efforts worked. Amaka continued to rise higher while their own businesses struggled. They could not believe she lived in a small rented apartment and yet was making more money than most landlords in Ikeja. Her popularity only grew, and she never seemed to run out of customers. Amaka, on her part, pretended to be humble. She would smile warmly and call people my customer as she served them steaming hot food. Her laughter was loud, and her voice carried across the entire street. To many, she was just a hard-working woman blessed by God. But when she returned to her kitchen alone, her face changed. She would close the door, bend over her pot, and whisper strange words under her breath. Then she would add her secret ingredient, stir carefully, and nod with satisfaction. The charm was working, and nobody suspected anything. Okoro, a young man who worked in a nearby bank, was one of Amaka's regular customers. He loved her jollof rice so much that he ate it almost every day. But one evening, after rushing through his meal, he noticed something strange. As he chewed, he pulled out a small curly hair from his mouth. At first, he thought it was a mistake or maybe from the meat. He threw it away and continued eating, not wanting to waste the food he had paid for. But something about it unsettled him, and that night he could not sleep properly. The next morning, Okoro told his colleague about what he had seen. But his colleague only laughed. "My brother, maybe one apprentice made mistake. Forget it, eat your food. Do you know how many people queue there every day?" the man said. Okoro tried to laugh it off, but deep inside he was worried. He began to notice that every time he ate Amaka's food, he felt restless if he didn't return the next day. It was as if his body was craving it uncontrollably. He didn't understand why. Meanwhile, Amaka continued her practice without fear. That same morning, She scraped her armpit carefully into the pot of soup. She stirred and inhaled deeply, smiling as the aroma rose. She believed the hair carried her essence, her power, and tied her customers to her. "Let them try to resist," she whispered. "They will always come back." And truly, they did. Even those who complained about hygiene still returned, unable to explain why. The bond was stronger than ordinary hunger. Mama Nkechi, an older woman who had her own small restaurant, began to grow suspicious. She had watched Amaka rise from nothing to having crowds at her door. Mama Nkechi had been in the business for 20 years, but never had she seen food attract people like that. She noticed that many of her own customers had abandoned her for Amaka's place. At first, she assumed it was just about taste, but the strange loyalty bothered her. One afternoon, she walked into Amaka's restaurant and bought a plate of rice. She sat quietly in the corner, eating slowly and watching. The food tasted good, but she felt there was something unusual in it, something she couldn't place. As she chewed, she thought she saw a tiny strand of hair floating in the stew. Her eyes widened. She stopped eating and packed the rest of the food to take home. Later, she tried to show her daughter, but the hair was gone as if it melted away. Fear gripped her heart. Mama Nkechi decided to warn her daughter never to eat there again. "That woman is not ordinary," she said firmly. "Her food is not just food, it is tied with something spiritual." But her daughter laughed and told her she was only jealous of Amaka's success. The older woman sighed deeply. She knew what she had felt in her spirit. And she knew that someday, the truth would come out, even if people refused to listen now. Amaka's fame grew faster than anyone expected. Within 2 years, she had moved from her rented one-room apartment into a spacious flat. She bought 2 cars, employed more staff, and even sent money back to her village to build a house. People whispered about her success, saying she was graced. They compared her to other women who worked for years without achieving half of what she did. But Amaka never explained herself. She only smiled, saying, "It is God." Her restaurant became so famous that even celebrities stopped by. Photos of them eating at Mama Amaka's kitchen spread on social media. Soon, bloggers began to write about her, calling her the queen of Ikeja food. Amaka loved the attention, but she also became more careful. She knew that the more eyes were on her, the more she needed to protect her secret. She made sure no apprentice or worker ever entered her kitchen before her. The door stayed locked until she was done with her rituals. But success brought arrogance too. Amaka started looking down on other restaurant owners, mocking them for being poor. She no longer greeted her neighbors properly. She began to wear flashy clothes, gold jewelry, and wigs that made her stand out. "Money is sweet," she often boasted. But she didn't realize that pride would open doors for suspicion. The more she shined, the more people started asking questions about her unbelievable rise. And soon, cracks began to show in her perfect empire. A journalist named Kimi had been hearing rumors about Mama Amaka's food. She worked for an online blog that specialized in exposing secrets in Lagos. One evening, she visited the restaurant disguised as an ordinary customer. She ate the food and instantly felt something unusual, an unexplainable urge to eat more even though she was already full. Her curiosity deepened. She began to suspect that this was not just about cooking talent. Something unnatural was keeping people tied. After her meal, she stayed behind. She watched the restaurant closely, noticing how Amaka disappeared into the kitchen for long stretches. No one entered with her, and yet large pots of food kept coming out. Kimi knew she had to dig further. She made up her mind to follow Amaka one morning, hoping to discover the truth. She wanted the kind of story that would shock Lagos. That night, Kimi told herself, "There is something strange in that restaurant. I must find it out. If my instincts are right, this is not ordinary food business. It could be the biggest story of my career." Her heart pounded with both fear and excitement. She knew she was playing with danger, but her curiosity was stronger. She didn't realize that she was about to step into a dark world where food and rituals mixed in unholy ways. Okoro, the banker, had now become restless. His cravings for Mama Amaka's food grew worse. If he skipped even one day, he would sweat, shake, and feel irritable. It was like an addiction he could not explain. Sometimes, even when he had food at home, he would leave it untouched just to drive back to Ikeja for her jollof rice. His friends started teasing him, saying he was in love with Amaka's cooking. But Okoro knew this was beyond normal. One night, after eating her food, he dreamed of Amaka. In the dream, she stood over a big pot, laughing, while hair floated on top of the soup. He woke up sweating and confused. He brushed it aside, telling himself it was only stress. But when he returned to eat again, the dream replayed in his mind, making him uneasy. He started to wonder if Maman Ketch's warnings about charms were true. But each time Okoro thought of stopping, the hunger inside him pushed him back. It was as if his body belonged to Amaka's pot. He could not break free, no matter how hard he tried. Unknown to him, many other customers were experiencing the same strange cravings. They thought they simply loved the taste, but in truth, they were all bound by Amaka's hidden ingredient. Among Amaka's workers was a girl named Fumi, who served customers at the counter. She was loyal but also observant. She noticed that Amaka never allowed anyone inside the kitchen before opening hours. Fumi also noticed how Amaka always scratched under her armpit in the mornings before locking the kitchen door. At first, she thought it was just an ordinary habit, but something about it unsettled her. One day, Fumi arrived earlier than usual. She hid near the back window and peeped into the kitchen. Her eyes widened as she saw Amaka standing half naked, scraping her armpit with a spoon and dropping the hair into a steaming pot. Fumi almost screamed, but she quickly covered her mouth. Fear ran through her body like cold water. She could not believe what she had just witnessed. That evening, she wanted to quit immediately, but fear held her back. She needed the job and the money. She also feared Amaka, who had grown powerful and arrogant. Fumi decided to keep quiet, but her heart was troubled. She wondered how long before someone else discovered the horrifying truth. One Sunday morning, Pastor Emmanuel of Stream of Life Ministries prayed for a young woman who complained of constant stomach ache. As he prayed, the Spirit of God revealed something unusual. He saw a vision of a restaurant where food was tied with a spell. He described the place, and the woman screamed. "That is Mama Amaka's kitchen," she shouted. The whole congregation gasped. The pastor warned them to stay away from the restaurant. He explained that charms could be used even in food to hold people captive. But many laughed it off, saying he was jealous or exaggerating. Only a few believed him. Still, the story began to spread quietly among church members. Rumors started to grow, though Amaka remained unaware. That evening, some church youths decided to visit the restaurant just to test the pastor's vision. They ate the food and laughed, saying nothing was wrong. But 3 days later, all of them confessed they couldn't stop thinking about the taste. They had already returned twice. The warning was true. Amaka's food carried a binding force. One afternoon, a young woman collapsed in Amaka's restaurant after eating a plate of stew. She began to vomit violently, crying that her stomach was on fire. People rushed to help her, and she was taken to a nearby hospital. News of the incident spread like wildfire. For the first time, fear entered the hearts of some customers. Could it be the food? Amaka panicked but quickly covered up. She visited the woman in the hospital and paid all her bills. She even gave the family money, and soon they were praising her kindness. The case was silenced, but whispers remained. Some people began to reduce their visits to the restaurant. But Amaka's arrogance did not allow her to stop her secret ritual. She told herself it was just a mistake. Maybe the woman had eaten something else earlier. "Nothing can touch me," she said, smiling into her mirror that night. She continued scraping her armpits into the soup, convinced that her power was untouchable. But cracks in her empire were beginning to widen. Journalist Kimi finally succeeded in sneaking behind the restaurant one morning. She waited until Amaka entered the kitchen and then crept to the window. Her eyes almost popped out when she saw Amaka raising her arm and dropping hair into the pot. Kimi grabbed her phone and quickly took pictures, her hands shaking. She knew she had captured something explosive. She left quietly, her heart pounding. She wanted to publish the pictures immediately, but she feared Amaka. She decided to dig further, to get stronger evidence. For weeks, she followed Amaka secretly, trying to understand her movements. She discovered that Amaka also visited a herbalist in Mushin once every 2 weeks. That confirmed her suspicion that this was beyond ordinary cooking. Kimi prepared her article, but she hesitated. She knew if she released the story, Amaka could come after her. Still, she felt it was her duty to expose the truth. She prayed for courage and told herself, if I don't do this, many people will continue eating poison in the name of food. One night, Amaka visited her herbalist, Baba Leek, in Mushin. She complained that people were beginning to suspect her. Baba Leek looked worried. He warned her that charms made from human hair were powerful but dangerous. If too many people started noticing, the spirits could turn against her. He advised her to stop before it was too late. But Amaka refused. I cannot stop now. My success depends on this. Without it, my food will be ordinary, and my riches will vanish, she argued. Baba Leek shook his head and told her greed would destroy her. He reminded her that every charm had an expiry date. Amaka ignored him. She returned home and doubled her rituals, determined to protect her empire. But little did she know that both human eyes and spiritual forces were already watching her closely. The ground beneath her feet was beginning to shake. Fumi could no longer hold her secret. She had been battling sleepless nights, seeing nightmares of hairy soups chasing her. One day, she went to Pastor Emmanuel's church and confessed everything she had seen. She cried bitterly, saying she feared for her life but could no longer keep quiet. The pastor listened carefully and prayed for her protection. The church decided to take action. They began to pray and fast, asking God to expose the evil. Meanwhile, Fumi warned her closest friends never to eat in Amaka's place again. Some believed her, but many still doubted. After all, the restaurant was still crowded every day. News of Fumi's confession began to spread quietly. It reached Kimi, the journalist, who quickly reached out to Fumi for an interview. Fumi agreed but begged her not to reveal her identity yet. Together, they planned how to finally expose Amaka to the world. Kimi finally released the article. It was titled, The Dirty Secret Behind Mama Amaka's Kitchen. She published the photos of Amaka scraping her armpit and dropping the hair into food. The internet exploded instantly. Thousands of people shared the article, some in disbelief, others in horror. Customers who once praised Amaka began to feel sick just remembering all they had eaten. Some wept, saying they had eaten her food for years. Others denied it, insisting the story was fake. The controversy shook Ikija and beyond. Crowds gathered at the restaurant, shouting and demanding answers. Amaka tried to deny it, saying the pictures were doctored. She even threatened to sue Kimi. But her confidence had cracked. Inside, she knew the evidence was real, and more people were starting to believe. For the first time, the once proud queen of food felt fear creeping into her heart. Within a week, Amaka's restaurant that used to overflow with customers became empty. The chairs were deserted, the pots untouched, and the once busy streets suddenly quiet. Her workers began to quit one after another, fearing for their reputations. Even Funk left, relieved that the truth had finally come out. Amaka sat inside her kitchen, staring at her pots. She felt a strange emptiness she had never known before. Her phone stopped ringing, her money slowed down, and the entire neighborhood now looked at her with suspicion. Children pointed fingers at her in the street, mocking her. She tried to defend herself at first, telling people the pictures were fake. But deep inside, she knew the evidence was real and her shame was exposed. The voices of angry customers outside grew louder each day, and the walls of her empire seemed to close in on her. For the first time, she wished she had never started the ritual. One night, Amaka packed a small bag quietly. She waited until midnight when the street was silent. Then, covering her face with a scarf, she slipped out of her apartment and disappeared into the darkness. Nobody saw where she went. By morning, her flat was empty, her restaurant locked, and her cars abandoned. Neighbors whispered that she had run away because of shame. Some said she fled to her village. Others believed she went into hiding in another state. But nobody could confirm. It was as though the ground had swallowed her whole. Her absence created fear. People who once ate her food now felt sick just thinking about it. They kept asking themselves how long they had been consuming her secret ingredient. The thought haunted them, and trust in roadside food began to break. The restaurant building stood empty, its faded signboard still hanging but covered in dust. Grass began to grow around the doorstep, and the once lively place became silent. At night, passers-by claimed to hear pots clanging inside, though the doors were locked. Some swore they could smell stew in the air, mixed with something foul. No landlord wanted to rent the place out again. The stigma was too strong. The name Mama Amaka's Kitchen had become a curse in Ikeja. People crossed the street instead of walking past the abandoned building. It became a ghostly reminder of greed and shame. Children told each other scary stories about the restaurant. They dared not go near, especially at night. The empire that once attracted hundreds of customers had turned into a fearful landmark, a scar in the heart of the city. Kimi, the young journalist, became famous for exposing Amaka. Her article was read across Nigeria, and she won awards for her courage. People praised her for saving many from the dangerous food. But deep inside, Kimi remained humble. She knew it had been risky, and she gave thanks to God for protection. She often thought of Funk, the brave worker who first spoke out. Together, they had brought down a giant. Kimi used her platform to warn people about hygiene and the dangers of blindly trusting street food. Her voice became stronger in society. But she also carried a scar. She never forgot the image of Amaka in that kitchen, dropping armpit hair into food. It haunted her at night, reminding her that evil could hide in the most ordinary places. Okoro, the banker who had once been addicted to Amaka's food, suffered the most. For weeks after she disappeared, he battled strong cravings. He would dream of her food, wake up sweating, and feel restless. Sometimes he even walked near the abandoned restaurant, staring at the locked doors. He felt ashamed, remembering how he had ignored the warning signs. He realized he had been enslaved by food. Slowly, with prayer and discipline, he began to recover. But the memory never left him. He swore never again to eat in restaurants carelessly. Okoro's story became a warning to his colleagues and friends. Whenever they discussed food, he would shake his head and say, "Be careful. Not everything sweet is safe. I know from experience." Mama Nkechi, the older woman who had once suspected Amaka, felt relief when the truth came out. Her own small restaurant slowly regained customers. People now preferred her place, saying at least they could trust her food. She cooked with renewed passion, always reminding people that honesty mattered more than profit. One day, as she served food to her daughter, she said, "Do you see now why I warned you? The eyes of elders see far. Greed will always expose itself." Her daughter nodded quietly, finally admitting that her mother had been right all along. Though her business was not as big as Amaka's once was, Mama Nkechi was content. She slept in peace, knowing she had nothing to hide in her pot. Her conscience was clean, and in the end, that was worth more than gold. People became skeptical about eating in restaurants. Even those who never visited Mama Amaka's kitchen began to reduce how often they ate outside. Street food sellers noticed the change. People now asked endless questions before buying. How do you cook your stew? Where do you buy your meat? Do you wash your pots well? Some restaurants shut down completely because customers disappeared. The story of Mama Amaka had created a wave of fear. Families preferred to cook at home, even if it meant waking up earlier. They no longer trusted the smiles of restaurant owners. The name Amaka itself became a joke. People teased, saying, "Hope this food no get Amaka ingredient inside o." The laughter carried bitterness, a reminder of betrayal that would not be forgotten soon. The mystery of Amaka's disappearance remained unsolved. Some said she died in a strange land. Others swore she joined a secret cult. But nobody ever saw her again. Her name faded into whispers, but the fear she planted stayed alive. Years later, whenever people told the story, they always ended with the same lesson: be careful where you eat. Not every food is safe. Parents warned their children, and pastors preached it in churches. It became a proverb in Lagos: never eat in anyhow restaurant. And so, the empire of Mama Amaka ended, not with prison or death, but with shame and disappearance. Her story remained a chilling reminder that greed and secrecy always leave scars, even after the cook has vanished. Thank you for watching. See you in my next story.